Good afternoon and good morning to some. It's a great privilege for me to be here. So, first of all, thank you to Sydney and his team for affording me this opportunity to speak at the European Chatbot Summit. For me, it's truly a privilege, and it's great to be amongst so many industry experts and to learn from everyone. So, my name is Kobus Greiling. I'm currently the Chief Evangelist at Human First. And today I would like to speak about Chatgpt in specific and large language models in general. And I would like to focus on the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the huge opportunities of large language models, but also on the threats. And I think that the threats are primarily focused in terms of enterprise implementations and the risk in terms of customer service and in general user experience. I think it's without doubt the power and potential of LLMs have been established. There's no doubt about that. But it seems like we're all still grappling with how to harness the power of large language models and how to have a sustainable enterprise solution which is manageable, you can measure, and you can build on. So let's dive into our chart. So you'll see we'll start with the strengths first of all, with the positive. So obviously the strengths, there's a huge existing default knowledge base. Meta refers to this as knowledge intensive NLP. So they've released a while back something called Sphere. It's not really well known, but I like the idea of having a knowledge intensive NLP system trained on a specific body of knowledge. And it's something we saw with ChatGPT where it was time stamped and there was a definite time period of relevance in terms of the data the large language model had. So in general, a huge strength is just default existing, based knowledge on a wide variety of topics. And, there are so many use cases where you don't have to have fine tuning. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of fine tuning and I'm always researching and prototyping fine tuning, but there's a lot one can do without any real fine tuning. I think a second strength is obviously human language translation, LLMs being multilingual. A while back, also, there was a project called No Language Left Behind, where there was an attempt to open source language translation on a large scale. But with large language models, language to language translation is really falling along the wayside, and large language models are taking this role of translating human language. And there's quite a few models that's capable of that. Obviously, it varies in accuracy. If you think about something like Whisper, it's speech recognition or a speech transcription service into text, at least you will see that the accuracy is quite high for some common languages, but the minority languages still lag. And it's the same with large language models in general. The translation for larger, more common languages are quite good, but for minority, smaller languages, especially in the African context, the accuracy still lags. So there are a few companies that specialize in fine tuning for minority languages, especially in the area of translation. The generative power of LLMs are undeniable. So obviously there's a generative aspect to large language models, but there is also a predictive aspect to large language models. So I think the predictive aspect, still needs some attention and some work. I've recently written an article about the power of combining large language models with NLU. So combining the generative power of large language models with the predictive power of natural language understanding NLU engines traditional NLU engines, if one can call it that, where there's a big potential for implementation. So the predictive power of large language models are not really, we're not seeing, large scale implementations of that. But obviously the generative power is very accessible, and that's an area of great attention. Obviously the idea of prompt engineering speaks to that, and especially of late we've seen quite a few chaining applications, large language chaining applications, LangChain applications, where a conversational system is built by chaining different prompts together, and to form a conversational experience or a multi-dialogue experience. We've also seen that prompt engineering has evolved into prompt templates, where you have a prompt template and entities or variables are injected into those templates. So it makes the templates shareable, storable, repeat use is easy, and the variables are just injected into the prompts. There are quite a few Y Combinator backed companies as well that focus on managing prompts, sharing prompts, storing prompts, etc. I would say that a big challenge for prompt engineering templates is chat markup language. So with chat markup language, there's an attempt from OpenAI to standardize the prompt that's sent to the large language model. And I think the premise of chat markup language is to segregate the input of users and system input. So that will be a challenge, and something most probably prompt engineering platforms or applications will have to incorporate. Zero-shot, few-shot capabilities, it's astounding. What I personally find astounding is how, within a conversation, context can be established with a few-shot capability of large language models. Obviously, large language models are multidisciplinary in terms of technology, coding knowledge, mathematics, arithmetic, etc., etc. General search and dialogue fallback, that's being used widely within chatbot development frameworks. And also it's used to create synthetic training data for chatbots. I think the most common example is training examples for intents. Synonym sentences, if you like, or similar sentences are generated that serves as intent training examples. The opportunities are definitely continuous research and development of models. It feels like on a daily basis there's a new announcement or a new service. So there's huge opportunities, and there's no knowing where we could be within the next few months or few weeks even. One can bootstrap a complete chatbot solution making use of LLM. That's quite possible. So there's big opportunities there as well. LLMs serve as the foundation for many innovative and new ideas, products and services. So there's a whole host of applications, as I mentioned, managing prompt engineering applications, curation services, quite a few products and services seeing the light just because of the existence of large language models. There will definitely be further automation of chatbot development. We've seen that with the Gartner leaders, most of them have launched AI assist for chatbot developers. Most of them implemented AI functionality within NLU model creation. So we'll see more of that. The one area I'm very excited about is autonomous dialogue state management. That is not quite there yet, but if there's any automation that can be achieved in terms of dialogue state management, within chatbot frameworks, that will be a huge plus, because that's a very state-based, fixed, hard-coded, if you like, process. So if LMs can be used to introduce flexibility into dialogue state management, that can really be of great use. And then obviously automation via prompt engineering. LMs can serve as a personal assistant as well, a personal process automator, if you like. So there's no telling where prompt engineering will go, and the power of prompt engineering. I think just something I would like to mention is that, and I think it's Nick Frost from Cohere that I heard this first. I heard him mention this first, and maybe he coined it. But at this stage, the prompt context window is quite small, and I could really appreciate when he mentioned that. You've really got to break it down step by step. And I think a huge leap forward would be when the prompt engineering context window will be bigger, and you can give a more condensed, compound instruction via prompt for the large language model to execute. Obviously, there are a few threats. I would say a big threat is data governance. There are a few companies with Protection of Private Information Acts where data cannot cross the country's borders. It needs to be kept within a certain geographic area. There are enterprises that's apprehensive about PII, personal identifiable information being sent, to a third party, be it OpenAI or or any of the other large language model providers. So there are definitely data governance challenges that needs to be circumnavigated. I think the rising costs with usage, because you're at the behest of the large language model, this has been really addressed by OpenAI, who drastically reduced their pricing, and so to a large degree for them that fear has diminished, but it's still something one's got to keep in the back of your mind, in terms of third-party costs. So there are frameworks that offer large language model services, but you pay for that framework and obviously the cost for the large language model as well. There are a limited amount of LLM providers. Obviously, there's been huge initiatives by Meta, especially, and also if you think of Bloom, quite a few initiatives to open source large language models and not be at the behest of a select few. Geographic and regional availability is still a challenge. That's definitely being addressed by someone like Microsoft Azure, offering OpenAI services within the Azure framework. Hallucination and inaccurate data being returned, that's still being raised by quite a few people, and especially in an enterprise customer care environment, that could be a challenge. And also, again, the availability of minority languages. That's one of the areas No Language Left Behind tried to address. So there's still some work in terms of minority languages, in terms of accuracy. Weaknesses, there's definitely a lack of no-code to low-code custom fine-tuning. So fine-tuning is definitely something that will become more important. Fine-tuning is really important for especially classification, and especially for very specific industries and specific verticals, and in automating fine-tuning via a no-code or a low-code environment, is definitely needed. The lack of NLU and NLG design tools for training and data preparation. So obviously, if you want to fine-tune, there should be a bottom-up process of collecting training data and curating that training data and creating unstructured data or transforming unstructured data into NLU and NLG design data. So there's definitely, in general, a need for that, and that's obviously something Human First specializes in. And my colleagues Alex Dubois and Stephen Broadhurst, they are at the conference in person, so you're more than welcome to have a conversation with them. Also, sourcing and structuring of fine-tuning data, which I mentioned. The default state of LLMs, I would say, is not enterprise ready, so there's definitely a need for for moderation and mediation layer, to manage that interface. And I think ongoing management of custom fine tuning, that's really important as well. Just the last few important considerations on enterprise implementations. So the one is managing user input data at scale. So you need to have a system that manages the input, user input, the data at scale, to curate the user input, to recognize patterns, semantic similar clusters in that input, and to make provision for that. Also managing the user input also caters for the long tail of conversation design, and to address the long tail. There needs to be, and this ties in with the curation I mentioned on the previous slide, there needs to be curation of the output the large language model generates. So in some sense, there needs to be weak supervision, or there needs to be some kind of ongoing cadence of how LLM generated data is, what's the quality of LLM generated data, and also then a process to, with a human in the loop, to coach the large language model and give it hints to improve the generated output. And then second to last, the different steps, the different conversational steps of the large language model also needs to be monitored, especially for a conversational input. And then lastly, prompt engineering, to create more predictable outcomes. So prompt engineering, that whole process needs to be managed very tightly, and the prompts needs to be improved over time to ensure that the LLM outputs are more predictable. And that's it from my side. You're more than welcome to, as I said, have a chat with Alex Dubois or Stephen Broadhurst at the conference in person, or you're most welcome to send me an email at